and welcome to another edition of Trader Talk TV. Today we've got James Avery from Kevel in the office. James, how are you?
Great, happy to be here again.
Great to see you. He's a regular on Trader Talk TV. It's great to have you back in the office. And today we're going to talk about innovation and customization in retail media. And James is coming in today to talk about how Kevel works with some of its clients around their sort of ad platform and retail media. So James, let's talk a bit about this. So you work with a lot of different retailers. And it's interesting, you see these native platforms sort of are very different on different sites. So it's almost like you kind of have to optimize towards the sort of like buying psychology of the customer on the site. Like, you know, a hardware will have a different buying psychology versus someone who's going to Tesco's. I want to talk about how you sort of work with some of the clients and how you build your platform around that. So let's talk a bit about that, the innovation element of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's good to kind of go back and think about the context of like where we got here in retail media.
Yeah.
And kind of how, you know, we went from, you know, retail was like a new thing with like your, you know, Amazon or eBay to suddenly everybody has a retail media network.
Everybody
right?
has
one. Like hotels have retail media networks.
Yes.
But they all kind of signed up with the same couple of vendors. Mm-hmm. So we just went from nothing to this kind of Cambrian explosion of cookie cutter retail media.
Yeah.
And so suddenly everybody has a off the shelf standard retail media. It's got some promoted listings. It's got some banner ads that we call native.
Yeah.
And like
can we
right?
draw
like,
out what a cookie cutter sort of platform looks like? Because it's important for people to realize here. A lot of the retailers they like advertising revenue, but they're more interested in actual sales on their site. So let's talk about why these cookie cutter platform, what they look like, and why they don't quite fit the model of retail media.
Yeah, I mean, even if we just look at a simple, you know, e-commerce site, right? Like you're searching for something, and then what does every one of them look like? You have all your product listing things returned, right?
Yeah.
All your little pictures of ketchup or
and your price,
John Deere Motors, and
your
price, and then the really basic networks, they'll stick a good old banner ad up there, right? Like a banner ad that we were serving in '97, right? And then a couple of these will get like a little promoted, listing. And I think there's a couple of key things. Like one, that's standard. That's what everybody can do, right? One, this is not a high impact ad unit, right? Like users have learned to block out a standard banner like forever. And then two, I think the other important thing is what's the relevancy for these product listings. And I think you notice this if you go to some of these really just, cookie cutter retail media networks, that these aren't even that relevant or that close to what you're searching for.
Right, they're not relevant to the product on the page, so the user experience is sort of like, downgraded effectively.
Yeah, and then sometimes you'll even have like, this will be promoted and this will be the same thing. Like this will be like a bottle of ketchup and then this is a promoted bottle of ketchup and they're the same exact Heinz ketchup.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of that kind of, really just inefficiency, but also bad user experience.
Yeah.
And like, what do retailers care most about?
Selling stuff.
Yeah. And so if you're hurting that with these like not very relevant promoted listings and kind of crappy banner ads, you're not only leaving money on the table, but you're also potentially hurting your core business.
So you're saying it's interesting because we've heard some sort of like criticisms about scale in retail media. That standardization was important. Like, I mean, are you going against the grain here, where there's a standardization ads across all these to make it more scalable? Or like, what's the thinking from a Kevel perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, some stuff can be standardized. Like we talk about the, promoted listings are a pretty standard idea of a unit. But the question is, who's deciding the relevancy? Where is that data coming from?
Yeah.
How is first-party data being used to target it?
Yeah.
How is this unit instead of a traditional banner ad? How is it? What you'll see Amazon do now is there'll be a video here, of like a dog running through a stream, right? And then there'll be like some real product listings here, and these are driven by first-party data and relevancy. And like that there instead of a banner ad makes a huge difference for both the user, because now you're equating something that's great for the brand, because the brand is like, when we think of our dog food, we want you to think of
dogs,
this dog running through running through a stream.
Right.
And then the relevancy of it, right? And so like we know, like, hey, if you're going to Tesco and you're looking at dog food, Tesco knows how often you buy dog food. They probably know what type of dog you have, how many dogs you have, what type of dog food you have.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of dog food you normally buy.
Yeah.
Like they can make this really relevant to you.
Yeah, yeah.
But the problem is like a lot of the platforms that people have built these cookie cutter, retail media networks on, you can't really get to this.
Are you saying that sort of like you're taking an old school mentality of sort of like and shoehorning it into a new environment, right? Like we kind of built this around open web publishers, like sort of your typical sort of news publishers, etc. But this is a whole new sort of landscape that requires a different sort of approach in terms of monetization.
Yeah, I think exactly, and also I think the value of first party data in retail is so much stronger than it ever was on publishers.
Yeah.
Right? Because how many times did you go to Daily Mail or whatever and you never even log in, right? You wouldn't log into it, but you end up there and maybe you read something. But their first party data is very light compared to Tesco that literally knows everything you bought for the last 10 years.
We talk about funnel, basically. You could argue that, the Daily Mail is top of the funnel, even though it seems like an oxymoronic thing to say, but like top of the funnel. So you can basically do display ads to bring you down the funnel, but we're sort of mid to low funnel here. This is sort of like where you need to kind of like have first party data and be able to activate it. I do want to kind of sort of labour this point a little bit, right? Kevel's position in this, you're kind of position yourself as a platform rather than an ad network. So, in terms of sort of like the companies that you're talking about, we won't name them on camera, but people will be able to guess them. Some are French and some are not. So is this sort of like a church and state thing where Kevel is a platform, and you can use first party data and not be using it elsewhere because it's the customers rather than being mixed and match across the entire network?
Yeah, I think that's the key difference with Kevel is that we're saying like we are a platform that the retailers can use to innovate.
Yeah.
And they can bring in their first party data. We're a data processor. We're not going to use that data to run ads somewhere else or to build our own machine learning models. We focus on enabling that customer to innovate. Yeah. And so they can bring in their first party data. They can even bring their own machine learning models, like BYOML.
Yeah, explain that. What do you mean? Like, how do they do that in terms of working with you guys?
Yeah, so essentially we instead of our relevancy being driven by just our own, like we do have a machine learning model we can use to drive relevancy. Yeah. But we have some of our customers who have huge data science teams.
Right.
They have a ton of data and a huge data science team. So they can come to us and say, we want to plug in our machine learning. We want to plug in our model and use that to power this relevancy. So instead of getting, like if you go search for dog food on Tesco, instead of them showing you, some irrelevant dog food you'd never buy, they're showing you what, this brand really wants to get you as a first-time customer. Yeah. Right? Like so they know that based on all their data.
Do you think that because like this sort of kind of flies in the face of the last trailer talk we had around the sort of like the opportunity of programmatic retail media and the scalability. Do you believe there's like they can work in tandem, right? You have, for instance, I think one of your clients is a very large hardware provider, and they have their own sales team and et cetera, et cetera. But do you think there's like two parallel tracks, right? There is one which is your sort of like custom and native ads, if you will, because your APIs help you build native advertising, which feels like the site, part of the site, the DNA of the site. That's high CPMs, custom stuff. And then there's your programmatic, which is sort of like basically the demand from trading desk agencies, brands that are building a customizable product listing advertising across these sites. So you think those two work in tandem? And let's explore how they can work together.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's similar to what we saw in kind of traditional advertising, right? You'd have the part that's the more commoditized. This is broad, and then you'd have the part that was a direct sales and very bespoke. Yeah. But I also think further, like when we talk about the programmatic piece, like if we can buy these programmatically, we don't want to give up relevancy in first party data. No. And so like the way we've designed the spec with the IAB is that the retailer is sending out the list of SKUs.
Which is what we talked about. I think you're right.
Yeah, we talked about that last time. And so like these SKUs can be driven by the relevancy in first party data. And so so it's really more about optimizing how it's bought. Yeah. And enabling Procter & Gamble to go to one place and say, I want to sell diapers.
You still think the programmatic angle needs to have that level of relevancy? Like the signal you send out, particularly around the SKU, improves the user experience, because I tend to agree. I saw some ads on on a site and I go, what is this? To be honest, from a personal point of view, it just cheapens the experience, right? That I'm seeing this non-relevant ad and going, what is this, like some, third-rate marketplace, like so.
Yeah, no, I think it's like, so I think the programmatic piece has to maintain that same relevancy, focus on first-party data, but then just make it easier to buy them.
Yeah.
Right, and easier to buy them across like a large number of these.
Yeah.
I think especially as you get to like the, if we start to talk about like all the like quick commerce companies and things like that.
Quick commerce companies?
Like
what's
Deliveroo or Flink
right,
or these kind of groups. It's like this kind of programmatic angle is a perfect approach to say, I want to sell diapers.
I genuinely think they are going to make a fortune. If we could get that right, I think that programmatic thing could be huge, especially with just the apps you talked about, Deliveroo and Uber and all the sort of type of apps. Can I just talk about sort of how your clients use you? Just reflect on this. How would a typical client then use a Kevel, right? So like, obviously they've probably done the cookie cut and stuff going, this isn't working, I'm actually losing sales, not increasing sales. How do they come to you and work with you? And what's the sort of angles for you to work? Because you work with some really interesting companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially the way to think of us, right, is that we're the layer down here that is essentially all the APIs. So we wrap everything up in our APIs, and we basically have, the best retail media ad server. We have things like, my writing's terrible today. Forecasting. We have things like our kind of audience, which is for first-party data. We have self-serve. So we have kind of all these different components wrapped up that they can build on top of. And I think the big difference in thinking about us is like they are building on these APIs and innovating themselves right. Versus saying we're just going to like, basically like the old days, drop ad tags on the page and wait for a check to come in the mail.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing when customers come to us, it's usually because they're hearing from brands, right? Their brands are going to them and saying,
I don't like this.
We don't want to buy this.
Yeah.
We don't want to buy this stuff. Like we can get this anywhere. What we really want from you is something like this, like this innovative video format.
Yeah.
Or what we want to do is we want you to tell us, hey, these people buy dog food from Tesco and they're always buying Purina.
Yeah.
But we want them to buy this instead. We don't want people that already buy our product.
Yeah.
Right? Kind of incrementality. They don't want to keep advertising to somebody that already buys it.
Yeah.
How do you find those new to brand users?
Do you have to have a level of sophistication to be a Kevel customer? Like, I mean, do you feel that, it's an interesting, so your trajectory, you're maturing as a business with the actual category that you're servicing.
Yeah.
So do you think that these are companies that need to be big enough and have direct sales teams, or what way do you work with clients, and what way do you sort of like, okay, I can work with them? Because like obviously if someone comes to you and they're not ready, you're not going to work with them, right? Because that's going to be a lot of time and effort for both parties.
Yep. No, I think for us, we see the people we work with are the ones who are investing in retail.
Right.
And so it's really...
that's their core business, basically.
Yeah, well, their core business is selling the goods, right? But then they really see the opportunity in retail media.
Yeah.
And they're willing to invest in it.
Yeah.
Like it's hilarious. In the last couple of weeks, I was in meetings where we went around the room and everybody introduced themselves, and it's a meeting of like 13 people, and none of them been at the company for longer than 9 months.
Right.
Because that company went on a hiring spree to say, how do we go from 50 million in retail media to 500 million in retail media?
Right.
And they're not going to do that just using a cookie cutter platform. No. They're going to invest and they're going to grow, and those are our customers, the ones who see the big opportunity.
Do you think that they need to be bringing some of their demand? So obviously, the cookie cutters would say, well, we're bringing demand from our external existing customer base. But it feels to me that you're working with companies. So speaking of that company, I would say they have a fairly big sales team, and they're going directly to brands. You need to spend more money, and there's sort of like upsell, digital shelf space, etc. So do those companies that you work with need to have that kind of framework in place?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think and what we're seeing is that more and more companies are making that jump.
Right.
And because their competitors are doing it.
Right.
And so like if you're a grocery store and your competitor is making 500 million in retail media and you're making 50, like that's really going to hurt you in the long run.
Yeah,
it's going to impact your core business because now they have all this additional margin. They can cut prices lower.
Yeah.
They can spend more on the other side of marketing, right? And so it's really it's a risk to the core business if they aren't being aggressive in retail media.
Yeah. Is this mostly US, or are you seeing this in Europe as well? Like, I mean, you have customers here, a lot of customers.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we see it like almost even more in Europe,
right?
Because I think especially in how the markets work here, if you're the number one in a given market,
brand leader,
yeah. So like we work with Sonai, who's like kind of Continente and things like that in Portugal. They're like the number one in Portugal, and so Unilever and Procter and Gamble are going to go to them
because they
for
want
Portugal.
to be seen.
Right. Yeah.
Just on a macro question, where is the retail spend increasing from brands? Is it? What are you seeing from you on the ground? Like, because like you hear numbers, sometimes a lot of that numbers is sort of allocated to Amazon, but like someone who's sort of at the coalface, what are you seeing from that macro trend? Is the pot growing? Where is it coming from? I'm curious.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely growing because I think the initial was kind of like the trade dollars kind of moving to retail media.
Yes.
But now you're starting to see, agencies and brands are trying to figure out how do we spend even more here because it's addressable, because it's, you can actually see the conversion, it's low funnel. And so I think we're only seeing spend go up.
Right, and where is it coming from, do you think? Is it coming from like the big walled gardens? Do you think those same brands will start pulling money out from your typical sort of performance on Facebook and Google and say, well, look, I'm not spending more money in PMax, I'd rather spend money in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is probably coming from there, probably not, but it's probably also coming from more traditional stuff. Just the pulling more from TV. Or, whatever they were still spending on print or other random stuff.
Yeah.
But also too, sometimes it's just net new spend.
Yeah.
Because if they can attribute, a 4x ROAS, they're gonna get more budget for that.
Yeah. Just last question really about the programmatic stuff, because I always kind of have to go back to that. But how are we looking in terms of sort of the open protocol? Are we making progress? Are we going to see like a big chunk of spend heading into that?
So we just with the IAB we just took the standard that we've been working with them on, and that's gone to the OpenRTB working group,
right?
And so now it's kind of in that stage,
right?
And so we're pretty close. So we have like a draft. We can actually start doing some development on that draft,
right?
So we've done that. We're kind of trying to get ahead of it, and so we're probably a couple months away from having something that we can start to really build on.
Exciting.
And so, our hope is by the end of the year, we're doing a good amount of revenue kind of through programmatic sponsored listings.
Okay. Look forward to seeing that. James, thanks for that. Interesting to get sort of like a deep dive on the retail media space, because we just hear lots of high level stuff, but having an actual practitioner in here who's at the coalface, it's great to have you in it. And always I'll have you back on the Trade Talk at any time. Thanks for coming in again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And that was Trade Talk TV, and we will see you next time.